So we open tonight viewing a scene from a hilltop overlooking a grassy plain on a warm summer evening. The moon is bright and full, as a group of several dozen armed soldiers bearing the heraldry of the triple red Pegasus on a white background are picking over an old encampment. Abandoned tents and supplies, wooden palisades fallen into disrepair with many openings. The scene is quiet as we watch these men move about, and two of these soldiers are coming together to discuss something when behind them we see figures begin to crest this hill. Horses emerging through the holes to these men unaware, riding past the palisades. With the riders atop these horses, and in slow motion we see the riders gallop over the defenses as they crash upon this disorganized group, rushing to react to this onslaught. The dismounted soldiers in the camps draw swords and spears to fight as the riders swarm and cut them down savagely with axes and spears of their own. And amid them we cut to see one giant of a man with long wild hair and a great axe, cutting a swath through several of these men at once, flinging them away with his force, his teeth gritted and fangs bared. The fight moves off-screen as we return to seeing the crest of this hill, and the scene transitions through a time-lapse. The battle is over. We are at some point, some nights later, to a new evening, seeing someone else cresting this hill on a new night, cloudier. Mist and fog settling on the plains. We see Robert DeVere as he is stepping past these same fallen palisades into this ruined camp. And Robert, when you crest, you see piles of the dead, burnt corpses piled high. Spears and flags protrude out from the ground they stabbed into. Here and there are old stains of blood and grime. The flags bear the heraldry of your grandsire, triplicate Pegasus. And this is the scene as you crest Maiden Castle, having completed your walk up. What do you do when you see this?
Robert will survey this scene of carnage. Does there look like there's anyone still alive?
No, these men look well dead. The bodies are not extremely old, but with your basic understanding of rot and the dead, you think less than a month, maybe less than a couple weeks. You're not exactly a physician, but it wasn't very long ago.
So it looks as though the banners of his grandsire are unattended to, and everything is just people bearing his insignia are all dead.
It looks like riders bearing the insignia you saw in Lincoln, the same emblem that Jean-Marc himself has had. Those are the only men you see dead here. You don't see any unmarked riders or anyone without heraldry here that are dead.
He'll look over the dead and get a count of how many fell.
It's difficult to say exactly, and of course, I should say some of them don't have heraldry because they've been burnt fairly well. Although, looking at the uniforms, the parts that aren't burnt, it looks very much like the more intact bodies laying about. You think several dozen.
Robert will take note of this. Don't suppose there's anything else left here for him, so he'll take note that the first group has fallen. And he'll turn to start making his plans to head back to Lincoln.
All right. So you begin your descent down Maiden Castle, presumably back to Dorchester, meaning to return to Lincoln. How do you mean to return? Do you mean to take a carriage or a boat back up?
Could try the boat again. That did seem to be the quickest way.
Certainly. Boats are certainly the fastest and cheapest way to travel at this time, whenever it's possible.
And that's what he'll go for, heading to the same port as before.
All right. So you make your way... Hold on 1 second. Sorry, coughing fit. You make your way back into town, and you find out about a ferry that is leaving in a couple days that you're able to book passage on, and it will head up north, stopping at London before getting to let's see, I want to say Boston. Yes. So stopping at London before Boston. In all, it'll take you about 9 days to get from where you are back to Lincoln.
So be it.
What are Robert's thoughts and what are his plans going forward?
His current plan is to update his grandsire as to the status of his men, and also the movements of these rebels as they've been actually moving all around.
All right. So you book your passage, and soon enough you're traveling back to Lincoln. And we will end the scene there as we see Robert departing, boarding his ship. As we transition we again return to the remainder of the gauntlet, Cormac, Elined, and Thomas, as they're making their ride out into the countryside of Cheshire to patrol. You haven't been riding too long before you are a good ways into the wilds bordering the Pennines. It's fairly quiet on the roads, although you think you have a few hours before daylight. It probably would not be safe to go much farther in at this point. But the three of you traveling on 2 horses are together, and I do have more information for the horse that Thomas bought. It is a dark brown, kind of a chocolatey brown Roundsea, which is on the order of a less expensive kind of horse, and is very generally usable for riding or for war. It can be used for carrying supplies, but it's never used to draw wagons like drought horses are. And so you're riding this dark brown Roundsea as Cormac rides Bolt, with Elined in tow, and the three of you are together riding the countryside. You have some time to speak, and the scene is yours as you are patrolling.
I think I know what you're expecting to find. But I doubt they'll be so easy to find.
Wasn't Prince Barbaro speaking of some force to the north of Chester he suspected as being Prince Ragnar?
I wasn't paying much attention to that buffoon, truth be told.
Yes, I do recall him mentioning such. However, if we are to scout them out, then we must be significantly more careful than we are of current.
Something tells me they aren't looking for a pair of riders.
True, but one can never be too careful.
I also thought this would be an excellent time to consider strategy beyond prying ears and loose lips.
At the mention of strategy, her attention turns directly to Thomas. Oh. And this strategy, it is to gain information on the Magister, is it not?
More in an effort to discredit him. I sent for Gaeton's heraldry. You recall the banner we found?
Yes.
Perhaps the same trick he intends to use on the axe could also be applied there. We could potentially implicate a fledgling found near the ruins as having located it as a witness. We're simply using this to corroborate her information.
More than that. We're making certain where his loyalties lie. I was not very forthcoming about how detailed she was in her description of the scene.
Well, you'll recall Amelia didn't actually know anything of the scene. So,
Yes, she was more of a scavenger after the fact.
if the Magister happens to deduce or identify this banner as having been present and implicating Robert Dufour, well, then we have him.
That's precisely what I'm saying. The Magister can't be trusted. I just want to prove that he can't.
And I feel like providing proper bait is an excellent way to accomplish exactly that.
Then we're of the same mind, with different ideas of how to go about it.
A different endgame, possibly. The same net result.
In any case, there's not much further we can travel tonight.
Though the question is, with how loyal the prince is currently to him, who's to say that our evidence won't fall on deaf ears?
I have no doubt of it. Barbaros is under some spell, clearly. However, Ragna is not.
So far as we know, I have very little experience with Ragna. Perhaps she'll side with us and see reason. Perhaps she'll simply see it as an opportunity to usurp.
We have precious few allies as it is. Barbaros can't be trusted. De Martinique can't be trusted. Ambrose possibly, but he's involved in his own affairs more than anything. There must be at least one Covenant Prince who isn't insane.
Or one who was insane before.
We've seen no sign of Ragna's forces. Should we return now, before it's too late?
I hadn't expected to see any of Ragna's forces.
For all we know, it could be mere rumor.
I expect it was a case of mistaken identity. I had hoped. But a wily enemy doesn't let you see them unless it wants you to. However, Thomas is going to pause a moment and give a very long, low whistle into the Pennines. Just on a lark.
What are you hoping to contact with your whistle?
Just see if anything answers. No expectation. Just, like I said, just kind of on a lark.
Nothing immediately answers. You're met with silence, broken only by the slow trot of your horses.
Thomas will break off to listen for a moment. Steer his horse to face the open wilds. Just stand for a moment, just to see.
Cormac will turn Bolt about quietly, watching.
Have you all make a perception alertness roll, difficulty 7. And one more from Elined. Oh wow. So each of you realizes once you stop the conversation and pause the horses, something Cormac and Thomas definitely would have had a much harder time picking up if you hadn't stopped to listen for it. But you just barely hear something, not from the woods to where Thomas whistled, but further along the road, along this ridge that kind of hooks around towards the Pennines. You hear something, a slow but steady, almost cacophony of sound that Cormac, you think you recognize because you've been around horses so much. You think you recognize the sound of hooves. And Elined, you definitely recognize this is the sound of riders. A good number of them, you think. At least a couple dozen coming from further up the road. And they'll be on you in probably less than a minute. They either have recognized you're here to intercept you, or they'll by chance come upon you soon. But you have this moment to react. You have about a minute.
She looks around at the group. Did anyone bring along their weapons, by the way?
Thomas pats his sword.
Cormac too. Never without it. Well, when he's out, anyway.
Okay. Well, that was more of an observation question, not an out-loud question.
Oh yeah,
There was no fake British accent to go along with it.
That was completely out of character. He's always wearing it when he's not just in the city.
Okay, so she says in a whispered tone, 12 riders, they will be upon us soon.
I thought that was who's I heard. What do we do?
Either we run, or we wait to see what they want and potentially get killed.
Or, what is the terrain like out here?
So the terrain you're on is kind of a ridge. There isn't a lot of room on the road before it starts a sharp drop into the woods and the foliage, and it's not very navigable. It's not a sheer drop off a cliff, but it's very arduous. And then going uphill is similar. So you're kind of on this road that cuts between the ridges and the mountains that are starting to border the Pennines. So there are woods all about, and you can't see very far up the road, but Elined, you saw in the distance the turning of some of these men on their horses, probably a little bit more than a quarter mile away.
They're but a quarter mile away. If we do anything, if they have scouts, they will likely see us. If they're unattentive, they won't, but I highly doubt that they are unattentive. Not with that many riders heading in our direction.
Out of curiosity, is this road, would they be coming from Chester or going towards Chester?
Towards it. You're coming from it, they're going towards it.
If they're coming for us specifically, there won't be any outrunning them.
And besides that, the horses are tired. We've been patrolling. We might as well greet them.
Or take our chances hiding.
Yes, but who knows what lies in those woods?
We know
Cormac
precisely what lies on the road.
Cormac is nervous at the mention of going into the woods. I mean, he shows that. No woods.
Very well. That leaves us one option.
Is there enough room on the road for us to at least take our horses off it, so we look like we're giving leave, or sidling out of their way to let them pass?
So you want to dismount your horses so you can get out of the way?
We'll just take our horses off of the road proper so we don't look like we're intentionally impeding them. If a lord is calling his banners in, it would have the same end appearance.
The road is about 20 to 30 feet across, so it's not very wide. You could go single file and stick close to the ridge going uphill, and that would probably be enough.
So we're definitely sitting up at an angle right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of
That makes things
think
more-
switchbacks.
Makes it more
Yeah, I'm
difficult.
with you. Thomas shrugs a bit and will dismount and lead his horse over to the ridge side, so he's as unobtrusive as possible while also having a horse.
Following that cue, Cormac will dismount and help Elined down if she wishes to.
Yes, Elined will go down as well. If only to not stand out in this crowd and to get some distance between her and the horse.
Alright. You dismount and lead your horses to the side, hugging this ledge. And not very long after, really seconds after, you can much more easily hear the sound of gallop, of hooves. And soon, riders are turning the corner and coming into sight, and you see there's maybe 20 of them in total. And you see that they do have the banners that you saw in Chester, what seem to be the gold lions on the red background, on their flags and some on their shields, as they get closer. And the riders slow their gallop to a quick trot as they see you, and this front rider comes up as his men continue behind him, and soon you are surrounded by these riders, these knights. They haven't drawn their weapons, although the man in front, who seems to have been leading them, he is at the center of this group, which has formed a semicircle around you and the ridge. What business do 3 riders without any banner or heraldry have in these lands at such a conspicuous hour? Brigands, perhaps?
Guests of Barbaros, and Thomas will hold up his ring.
He looks at the ring without any obvious evidence of recognition on his face before he looks back to you. Are you sure you are not agents to the she-devil of York, come to finish your work?
Not at all. I'll happily be presented before Barbaros, if you care to.
Give me a charisma, empathy, or expression, your choice. He seems to look at you very carefully before he slowly dismounts from his horse and takes off his helmet to look at you face to face and in the eyes. Perhaps you are guests of Lord Barbaros.
Thomas will offer a hand. Thomas Chamberlain, Lord of the Gauntlet. Pleasure.
He grasps your forearm. Sir Monte, knight, in service to Lord Barbaros and Sir Isaac Lavelle.
Well met, sir.
But again, what business do you have on these roads?
We'd heard that his lordship had been troubled by raiders. Thought he might not mind an extra set of eyes, or 3.
He nods. There have been raids in these lands. Marauders, bearing the sigil of the White Rose of York, on the order of the witch who poisons the Duke's mind.
Where last did you encounter them?
East of here, on a hamlet that no longer bears any significance to have a name. Some of the surviving farmers, they pulled a patch from one of these men before he escaped. A patch of the White Rose.
Quite curious.
Quite arrogant, if you ask me.
I've seen very little of the Lady Ragna, though she does not strike me as arrogant.
Do not trust her, or give her the benefit of doubt, because she is a woman. She has wiles. And his eyes go from you to Elined before going back to you. She has bewitched the Duke of York.
Thomas grins very broadly. I am intimately familiar with the wiles of women. But, as I say, she does not strike me as arrogant or foolhardy. If she were an adversary, I would mark her as a very worthy one.
But she's not an adversary, Cormac pipes up. She is a prince of the Gauntlet whom we all serve. Covenant, he says.
If she raids the eastern hamlets of this county, it is arrogant to me.
The key word being if. I wonder.
I saw the cloth myself and handed it to another knight to present to Lord Barbaros.
I've seen a great many very expertly done forgeries. And would it be a terribly difficult thing to strike down a company of knights and steal their heraldry?
Indeed, I do not discount it as impossible, but it seems a far-fetched theory to me. To risk such and represent another. With some forgery. To what end?
Perhaps to bait Prince Barbaros into a war with Prince Ragnar.
Were it a lone incident, perhaps I could see your point, but there have been many incidents in my service. And he shakes his head. I do not discount this. Only the latest in a long string of insults and growing arrogance.
I understand there is an old feud between them, which would lend credence to any belief that one might goad the other into a fight, which would make the lie that much more easily believed.
I think perhaps you look for intrigue and mystery where there need not be any.
I simply like to explore all possibilities, rather than simply the most obvious explanation.
And as you're speaking, you see at this point, the circle of knights has given you more space, and there's some movement in the crowd as they part for a rider to come through. And you see the man that appears is riding a notably nicer steed, a white courser of some breed, with almost regal dressings upon the horse and himself. The long red riding cape, as many of the other knights do, but he has no helmet, no armor. He's simply in a tunic and hose, a long saber at his belt. You see this man. And as he emerges from the crowd to be at the side of Sir Monte, he looks down upon you. Did I hear the name Thomas Chamberlain?
Thomas gives a small bow. You did indeed.
He looks at you and then looks to the other two. And you are?
Cormac de Courcy, my lord.
And Elined Virchsinkin.
A gauntlet indeed. And he as well dismounts. You seem to be lacking a member, Lord Chamberlain. I do hope He looks back to the other two. Lord de Vere fares well then.
Carrying out urgent business at behest of the Covenant.
Of course. Well, we appreciate your commitment to aiding Prince Barbaros in his attempts at protecting his land. Our scouting has come up with nothing, and the hour is late after all. And he looks briefly to the sky before back to you. Perhaps we might escort the gauntlet to its destination.
We were just about to return to Chester.
Then you shall enjoy the protection of Lord Barbaros's men.
Quite so. And he'll go ahead and climb up into the saddle again.
And most welcome it is indeed, as Cormac will help Elined out in the saddle for mounting himself.
He nods to each of you. It is good to find friends in this country land, even at this hour. And Sir Monte looks to each of you as everyone begins mounting back up, and he puts his helmet back on.
True friends are a value greater than gold or silk. But my father once told me that your real friends you'll be able to count on one hand throughout your whole life.
Isaac Lavelle gives you a long look before looking ahead, and Sir Monte calls to the other knights. "To Chester!" And he looks to each of you in turn briefly before riding ahead, continuing on in the direction that you came from.
Cormac will kick Bolt into a gallop to follow. Yeah!
Thomas will follow suit, try and keep pace with Lavelle. He has questions.
All right. So the group of you return hastily to the city of Chester with this new escort, led apparently by Isaac Lavelle. And in none too soon, for as you return to the city walls, you see that the sky is starting to get that hue of blue it gets before the dawn. Where will the gauntlet be staying tonight?
Probably back at the inn.
All right.
Yeah, sounds as good as anything.
Okay. So you make your way back to the inn, and Isaac Lavelle brings the men back to the castle, informing you that he'll be remaining at the castle the next few nights before he departs again. And so the day takes you all into sleep as the scene fades and the group of you return to torpor for the day. That scene ends, and we will switch scenes. Returning to follow Robert de Vere, as he is traveling England, meaning to return to Lincoln. You've done much traveling, Robert. It is getting to be about the later end of summer now, as you return to Lincoln. Where does Robert mean to go now that he's back?
Depends. How is his blood pool doing?
I'm gonna say you've been able to balance out over the last week and change, so there has not been any change. Any net change, I should say.
Alright, then his first task will be to speak with his grandsire.
Alright. You're informed when you go to seek out your grandsire by Hugh de Balsam that it seems Jean-Marc is away, traveling on business of some sort. But he'll be back in about a week's time.
Did he mention where he was going?
He pointedly did not. Hugh mentions with some regret.
Did any riders come by with an urgent message for him?
None that Hugh knows about.
Well, thank you for informing him. For now. A week's time, you say?
Mm-hmm.
He will... Yeah, he'll actually return to his haven and attempt to call the ranger to him.
Okay, through messengers and such?
Actually, no, he'll use the powers of the blood.
Oh, interesting. Alright. Make me crack open something I never use. Okie dokie. So I'll have you roll your Charisma Subterfuge. Difficulty will be 7. Did you ever use Presence on him before?
He did.
Okay, I'm gonna make it 5 then.
Difficulty 5, okay.
Because this does get easier the more you use Presence on someone. Three successes. Alright. Let me interpret that. You feel that you are making use of your gifts, your powers, in the way that you are familiar. It's hard to say when he'll show up, what condition he is in, or how far away. But you do feel like you do have a pull on this man as you kind of visualize him and focus your blood to draw him to it.
With that accomplished, Robert will bid time until either his grandsire or this hunter arrives. Of course, taking moments to go hunting every now and then.
Alright. So you'll be there about 6 nights before one of your staff alerts you to a strange man, a ragged-looking man, at your front gate asking to be let in. Apparently he's been there for hours and you're alerted to it as you wake up in the evening.
By all means, let him in.
The staff nods and quickly moves to go let this man in. And a number of minutes later, a man is escorted in whom you recognize. He's fairly rugged looking, from what you recognize, short hair. And he looks like he has a strange and confused look on his face, like even he doesn't know what he's doing here. But he walks in without any hesitation, walking up to you to about 10 feet or so until he seems to get comfortable enough and still looks at you. You're not gonna believe this. Strangest thing. Did you tell me where you, looks down at the ground.
I must have mentioned it. It is good to see you again.
Yes. It's very good to see you as well. I, trust you got the message I sent, some weeks ago.
I have received one of your earlier messages. I figured it would be a good time to speak with you. How fortunate you are here.
Yes. Something just made me think that I should come check in. I forgot myself I knew where this was. Anyway. Yes. What was the last message I sent to you? Hard to say what gets back and what doesn't.
I believe you were actually being followed by some of them. It is quite good to see that you are unharmed.
Well, a couple close calls there. This group you had me track, it was, not your standard mercenary fare. Tell me again, who these guys are?
I am not certain, only I suspect they are responsible for a recent attack on a manor.
I'd heard of some of these wild men up in the far north in the Orkneys and the Shetlands, and maybe a few people out west in the Connacht who could run like you wouldn't believe, but nothing like what I saw in this forest, I tell you. I was on horseback. I could have sworn the same man was running after me. Must have been more than one. Couldn't have been the same man. I did catch an arrow, but... well, I'm a sturdy stock, you see. He kind of grips at his arm where it's bandaged up.
Goodness, do you need any nourishment, please? I must insist you stay for the night.
Well, that's mighty fine of you to suggest that. I think I will take you up on that. I feel pretty at home here. I've never really spent any time in these manors. I don't know, I like it here. I'm sorry to say, after I got ran off, I tried to double back after staying low for about a fortnight. From what I could tell, the tracks of these guys, they doubled back about southeast. I don't know about how long. I was actually in the middle of tracking them. Way far to the south. When I don't know, I felt like coming to check in.
It's good that you did. This group, they have put a whole hamlet to the sword.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, you don't say.
Yes, their violent attacks will only grow at this rate. But since you most likely have a good understanding of at least some of their movements, perhaps when all the men that could be gathered together to hunt them arrive here, you would no doubt be most useful in tracking this group.
Well, it depends. I lucked out. They passed by the mouth of the River Thames to the west. I was tracking them just south when I got this call and I started coming north. But, the south of England, that's a large place. By the time I get back, the tracks might be cold. Who knows where they'll end up. Of course, the Weald is famous for harboring their types, but, it's a fairly large group to hold out in that forest.
Worry not. With how active they've been, I'm sure the opportunity will arise again.
He shrugs, gripping at his arm again, kind of thoughtlessly.
For now, I think it is best to see your wound tended to.
This thing, it's nothing, it'll heal. He looks down at the bandage where there's some darkness, some grime, some of it you think from the wound and some of it just from being outdoors for so long.
Now I have my servants prepare for you a meal and bath.
That's very kind of you, Lord de Vere. I appreciate everything you've done. And he looks confused even as he says that, like he's trying to think of what all you've done.
But of course, since you've met with success in some way, it is only appropriate that you are rewarded.
He smiles faintly, but you can see extreme fatigue in his eyes. Who knows how long he's been writing. I think I'm, gonna see about that bed now. I'll see you in the morning, Lord de Vere.
Not in the morning, but the next evening.
Well, as you like. And he nods and, seemingly lacking any formal etiquette, he kinda awkwardly turns and starts making his way out of the room. You're left alone. What is going through Robert's mind? What is he thinking now?
There's actually a relief that this man is still alive, and Robert's actually considering even ghouling him. But for now, he has his minds on what he will tell his grandsire. as he waits for him to return.
All right. So the scene fades as you're left alone with some thoughts about what you will report to your grandsire. We will transition back. Returning to Cormac, Elined, and Thomas, where are Elined's thoughts at right now with everything that's going on? Catching up with her process.
The thoughts of the current goings on. Elined, well, she's always been a rather loyal sort to. If she says she's going to be loyal to someone, she generally means it. And these questions are into who or what may be being corrupted. Investigations into her superiors are wavering in a way. Mainly due to her own belief that everyone has their place. If someone serves another, it means they serve. To go as far as to openly question them, however, is to openly question the very hierarchy that is there. Which, in doing so, only brings about chaos and madness. But on the other hand, if these questions are not done with, then this very hierarchy could be done away with. As such, she is very much conflicted.
All right. And Cormac, what does he make of everything going on right now? His companions, his mission, his leaders?
He's definitely seeing a change in his companions the more they learn about the Covenant and the princes who govern it. Learning that just because you're a prince does not mean you're above petty squabbles and old arguments. And that those petty squabbles and old arguments also filter down to your subordinates, themselves included. And the more he sees, the less he questions the idea that perhaps the rebels are right. Perhaps it is time for a change. But he hasn't shared this deep thought with anyone yet, although he's sure that Judith suspects it. For now, he wants to see what this Magister is about, and perhaps play things by ear.
And Thomas, what do you make of everything right now?
Thomas is currently gauging whether or not he should share with Elined his... I'm trying to think of the right word. The soft spot he has for the rebels, the sense of camaraderie there. Obviously, there are some thoughts given to personal matters, but at the moment, his Thomas / Judith thoughts are more focused on, like Cormac, outing the Magister But there's also some concern as to whether or not, if there's evidence that Barbaros has really been corrupted by this man, perhaps that would explain his dismissive attitude towards previous calls to aid. And if there's bad enough blood there, he might not necessarily be willing to forgive, in spite of evidence to the contrary.
All right. So, upon return to the inn, of course, you have a few nights when you know Isaac Lavelle will remain in town, in the city of Chester. Do you mean to still question him?
Thomas really only had just the one question. It might lead other places, but at the moment, just one.
There is, of course, ample time in these nights to find him at the castle or nearby to speak with him. What was your question?
Thomas would approach him and ask, "I was curious. Have you and your men scoured through the Pennines yet?"
The Pennines are rugged terrain. No well-kept roads are maintained. We have had some outriders push the edge, although the presence of the lupines make it a dangerous endeavor to press very far. Suffice to say, the Pennines are not well scouted.
Mightn't there be a reason for a force to hide there, then?
Perhaps. Though they would, of course, risk the ire of the lupines, should they come across them. What force do you expect to find in those ridges?
One that does not wish to be found, of course. Though, if you can spare the force, I would say send a few kind. If they return, perhaps a weightier force to follow.
I have considered this. It is a dangerous thing to gamble with one's men. He kind of looks off in the distance. Indeed, we do not know what Prince Ragnar intends, and should the worst come to pass, we may yet need every man, body and soul.
As a member of the Gauntlet, I cannot, in good conscience, raise a sword against a sitting Covenant prince.
Are you volunteering to explore the Pennines yourself?
If you can find no kind you trust to do the job, I suppose that I would acquiesce to the request.
He looks at you sidelong, almost suspiciously. For all the ill your sire may have said of me, I would not wish for you to volunteer on what very well may be suicide.
For whatever it's worth, my sire has spoken neither ill nor well of you. I don't recall your name coming up.
He smirks for a moment. If you volunteer, I will see what men I might find to accompany you. I cannot imagine it would be a large force. Even in the summer, the Pennines are not hospitable. There is a reason no one dwells there.
It would be wiser for kind to go, but as I said, if it needs doing, and no one else will, I'll be there. At the very least, they won't directly draw the ire of lupines simply by their mere existence.
The lupines of the northern areas are very protective of their land, what remains of it. The few run-ins I have do not indicate to me that they have much compassion for the men of this city.
Perhaps they would be willing to negotiate.
And he actually smiles at that. That I certainly would not suggest you volunteer for.
Know you another merchant in this city?
Give me one moment. I know of a desperate Scottish woman and a sycophant, barely older than yourself.
So know then.
There are not many of our kind who dwell in the city of Chester.
Well, then I suppose I'm the only one fit for that particular task. If contact is made, I will negotiate.
If contact is made, I sincerely encourage you to depart at your earliest convenience. You would have more success negotiating with a raging sea.
I don't know if you heard the story, but there was a man once who did just that. And at his behest, it parted.
He smirks at that, somewhat amused. Well, I certainly can't say I haven't warned you, Lord Chamberlain. I can tell you now there won't be any officers of the kind who will volunteer, but perhaps some of the lower-ranking enlisted.
They need be only scouts. A few men who can ride in half a day and ride back out the other half. I don't expect even a foolish force to go much further in than that.
He nods. I'll see that Sir Monte comes up with some. When shall you be departing?
Wait, I think we misunderstood each other there, Vukar.
Okay.
Thomas was offering in the event that no one else could be found, because Kine aren't going to be put to the sword, the claw, just for showing up.
What he's told you is that there won't be anybody going except for enlisted, so they can accompany you, but there won't be any officers to lead them otherwise. So it's either nothing, you alone, or you with these enlisted soldiers.
Well, in that case, when can the men be ready?
I imagine at next dusk. Do not expect many men. Nor should you expect great bravery.
There is a very fine line between foolishness and bravery. We'll see which rises to the top.
They shall likely be the most desperate, or indebted.
Well, if we make it back in one piece, I'll fix the ladder.
He nods and begins to turn away, returning further into the keep. Does Thomas mean to do anything else in preparation for this?
He's going to go and polish his breastplate that he would have brought along just for such an eventuality. And sharpen his sword. And probably also inform his companions that he's done something very stupid.
Alright.
Elined will agree that is, in fact, very stupid.
So we'll open that scene as you hear this news from Thomas. Cormac and Elena, we'll say you're in Thomas's room when you hear this news.
So, quick question here. By any chance, are you suicidal?
Wondering the same.
Not the last time I checked.
She rubs her forehead a bit. Heaven! At the very least, if I go along, you'll have someone with at least some tactical mind to get out of there.
I expect at most 10 men. More likely 5.
I've had worse odds. But we're not going into a battle, or at least I hope not. Then again, these are wolves we're talking about. It's best to prepare for one.
Cormac is pacing the room. He looks off-put.
I won't tell either of you where you can and can't go. Though, I don't feel comfortable with the idea of more than one of us going.
Just to be clear, out of character, the recommendation is they're going to go talk to the Lupines?
Well, no, the recommendation is that we scout the Pennines. If we make contact with the Lupines, then Thomas intends to negotiate.
Yes, okay, that's what I figure.
And Elined has plans of going along purely for tactical reasons.
I've seen
Just in
these
case.
things. Sorry. I've seen these things, Thomas. Believe me, they can't be negotiated with. There are some things that we best leave alone.
Hence why I mentioned going along for tactical sake. More to... If there's a way to get them out, get them out.
There are no tactics that can be used against raising animals.
Everything that thinks wants something. Even cows want cover and cud.
They do want something. Us dead, blowing in the wind.
But what if I can offer them something more? Something they value more than simply my scalp or my
Oh,
hide.
really, Thomas? What do you have to offer them? Tell me.
A treaty.
A treaty? On what terms?
Apparently, from what Sir Lavelle says, they ferociously defend their territory, I would suppose, from the encroachment of civilized society. If I could convince them that by agreeing to patrol their wilderness for enemies of the Covenant would avoid pressing to develop their territory.
A straw man argument at best. They're quite capable of defending their own lands, trust me. It took a vampire of great age and power to kill even one of them.
I'm aware. But no one can hold out inevitably forever.
We can.
Eventually, roads will be built. And, as many have found out previously, the Kine outnumber us considerably. How many do you imagine the Lupines can fell before they fall upon them in greater numbers than they can overcome?
Cormac just scoffs and continues pacing. He's clearly uncomfortable with this.
Now, I believe none of us are happy with the current turn of events. The best thing we can do is make what we can of it.
With luck, we ride under a white flag. And perhaps they understand we make no war with them. Or perhaps we lose a few volunteers in our haste to evade a slavering beast.
And how fast can you run, Thomas?
As
They'll
fast-
outrun a horse, I'll tell you that much.
We'll just have to find out.
Damn you. I'm obligated to go with you because you're my sword. And he pauses, brother. But I had a lot of years left ahead of me.
I would release you from that obligation.
The hell you will.
It was my tongue got me into this.
Sometimes I wonder if you should just cut that thing out. It gets you into a lot of trouble.
I'd be more comfortable if it were just me that got into trouble.
When do we leave?
Next dusk.
I suggest we procure bows and arrows. Have you any
Yes.
skill with archery?
Oh, no, I'm not skilled with archery. I only ever used the sword.
Not a whit.
Then I'll have to show you the basics. It'll be best to keep them at a distance.
Pointy in goes in the other man, yes?
It's not as easy as all that. There's an art to it. Even I am not a master. But I know enough to hit the target most of the time. If you get close enough to them, you have to use a sword. I'm afraid that's your end. Unless you have a witch.
If you get close enough to them, there is no using the sword. That will be the end.
I just noticed that Cormac has no occult or earth wisdom at all. So he would have no way of knowing what any of their weaknesses are.
Can I roll a cult to see if Elined knows anything?
Let me look at your sheet and consider your character.
Same though.
Yeah, Cormac only knows what he saw
Though,
with the witch.
admittedly, werewolves are probably not something she studied within the confines of a cult.
Yeah, that's what I'm...
She more delved into it because, well, obtenebration.
Right. I'm gonna say no to Elined and no to Thomas. Because here's the thing. You pretty much said it yourself. You can study occult just like you can study academics, but really your academics represents your military training, not your classical training. And Thomas's leadership training really reflects specifically leadership of men sailing. And so there's some nuance to each of these abilities and knowledges. And I'm going to say knowledge of werewolves is very niche. I don't know that any of you would ever have reason or access to have come across any information on lupines. So I'm going to say no on this one, even though you do have a cult.
Well, it was a bit of a stretch anyway. I was just throwing the ball out there.
Sure. No, it's good to ask questions.
Cormac does have another idea. He says, "This Lavelle, he seems to know a bit about them. Might he know any of their weaknesses?"
I suppose it's worth asking.
We're not preparing for if things go sour. We're preparing for when they do.
Meanwhile, I'll be over here running over a few escape tactics in my mind, though. I sincerely hope it doesn't come to that.
And we have some work to do.
Yes, we do.
Alright. What will the gauntlet do next in preparation?
Cormac's going to see about procuring those bows. He'll
Elined,
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I was just going to say he's going to try Dever's Manor first to see if he might have an armory there, and then go on to other means.
Elined is curious as to the current wares that the troop that's going with them has. If they have gear that's lesser to their compatriots, or if they have on par. Generally getting a feel of what they're working with.
You'll figure out fairly soon, upon the next dusk, that the men you're accompanying, and Thomas guessed correctly, you only have about 10 men to work with, and many of them are very young men, late teens, most of them. They're not equipped very well, they're very poor men-at-arms overall, and you think they're mostly in gambesons and some wooden shields. They have what seems like good iron swords. They do have helmets, and they do seem to have horses for riding, but they're definitely among the poorer men, more inexperienced. And less equipped. There are no knights among them, obviously.
So the ones that could afford to lose, then.
These are the men desperate enough, or indebted enough, or with nothing to lose. The glory seekers. You think maybe some with suicidality, who can say? These are not well-established soldiers or men of war. These are the leftovers.
Are they foot soldiers, or do they have mounts?
They have horses. It's probably the most expensive thing each of them has.
Are the horses your standard fare, or are they lesser, better in any way?
The horses they are riding are similar to the one that Thomas bought. They're Roundseys, which are on the lower end of the spectrum of expensive horses. They're general purpose and fairly common. They're not bad horses per se, they're just not heavy cavalry destriers or anything.
Of course. With that knowledge, which she would prefer to have gotten the night before, is she would attempt to retire to her quarters after getting something to eat and try to go over some retreating strategies in her mind before the general event happens.
Absolutely. So you spend some time in contemplation. Cormac, you're successful in drawing from the armory that...
I just realized that Devers Minor is not in this city.
No, that's fine. You're able to surmonte through Lavelle. He guides you to the armory that you're able to access, and there are some bows and arrows stacked up against the wall, which you're able to draw.
And does he have a practice range that we can use for a short while?
Yes, absolutely. There's a courtyard behind the keep, and so you find that. And how is Thomas preparing?
Have the men themselves been gathered at all, or no? Not yet.
This kind of broad strokes, like over this next night, preparations that are being done, and up until you guys are ready to leave.
Okay.
You find that it seems like they've been gathering supplies throughout the day, so by dusk they're just about ready to go.
Then Thomas will hold off on giving the inspirational, morale-building speech until they are actually about to set out, or right before they're about to dive into the Pennines. Instead, he will go with Cormac and get some rough instruction on the operation of an bow.
All right. Is Elined gonna try her hand at archery at all?
Yes, she will, but she would like to get herself topped off as far as blood is concerned before they head out.
Sure. I will let you make the roll you feel is appropriate for hunting for Elined. Standard difficulty. I'm kind of assuming that for the most part you stick to your mainstays of hunting. Oh, absolutely. Your poetry skills are well appreciated in this city, and you find 4 people at one point or another over an hour of hunting while you're preparing that you could feed from.
Alright, I take 1 from 3 of them in order to top me off.
Okay. Easily enough done. Is there anything else anyone else wants to do before you all depart with your 10 men into the Pennines?
Quick question for you. Can I throw XP on the fly at archery or not?
I'm gonna say no, because you've had 1 night of training, and...
Fair enough. Thought I'd ask.
No, that's fine. It's good
Thomas
ask.
would also try and make sure he's full up on the blood.
Absolutely. You also may try your hand at hunting for the night.
Cormac as well.
Go for it.
Charisma plus empathy work.
Absolutely. That sounds appropriate.
I'm going to do that seduction thing again. Manipulation subterfuge.
Okay.
Or charisma subterfuge, rather.
Alright. 3 and 2 each. People, that is, not blood points.
Yeah, I only need 2 to top off, so that's what I'll take.
Same.
So each of you find time in this night to hunt, and you don't make much of an impact on the people here, which is good. And the dawn comes and the day goes until you come to find dusk has arrived The men are prepared, the supplies have been loaded up, and some of them with fear in their eyes, some with excitement, and some with just forlorn looks of hopelessness. Your 10 men, your 10 very young soldiers, are ready and waiting to go. Mounted
Ellen. And Elined would instruct Gertrude to remain here because she is trying to make the best of some rather bad odds.
It's an important clarification on Gertrude. She does seem anxious about this mission you're going on into the Pennines. She's heard it's rugged terrain out there and is worried for your safety, but trusts that you'll be smart, and if things seem to go the way that they did back in the day, that you'll make it out again.
If this way ends up dying, at least word can return home instead of just, oh, she just up and vanished one day.
Okay. Then they await the 3 of you to decide when you're leaving. They wait your command.
Thomas would go ahead and mount up and gesture for them to follow.
Elined will as well, and glance out at the troop they were given. I know it is uncommon for a woman to be giving such speeches. However, rest assured that the 3 of us that are leading you are accomplished in what we're doing. We will do everything in our power to make sure that everything goes along as planned. More importantly, this is a scouting mission. As such, do not drag attention to yourselves.
Make a charisma leadership roll, difficulty 8. Alright, 1 success. A few of the men look between each other, and there's certainly hesitation in their eyes, but one of the men at the front, a young man, short blonde hair, he nods to you from his horse. Thank you, my lady. We trust in your leadership. He looks from you to Cormac and to Thomas. We've been told we were in good hands.
She then turns her attention to Thomas to see if he's going to try to rouse their spirits at all.
Well, in that case, I guess now is as good a time as any. I'm going to throw awe at them, see if I can't add some extra weight to this.
Okay. We spend a blood point, roll charisma performance, difficulty 7.
When did it start costing a blood point? Oh, there it is, as I was.
Unless you don't want to, now that you know.
Just new things in Dark Ages 20. My bad.
No, you're not. You're not feeling that you're pulling the strength of your blood to draw their attention to you right now.
Well, he can still make his speech and make the normal leadership role. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
Just because there's no blood behind it doesn't mean he can't be inspiring. We go into a territory you men have been told is rugged and uncivilized. I'm here to tell you that you're all going to make it back alive and in one piece. And in return, I'll see that any debts you might have had before will be wiped away. Your bravery and your companionship will not go unrewarded. We merely wish to see if any outriders happen to have made camp within the Pennines and then come back for a mug of ale. Wash away any worries you might have had when you marched out this evening.
Alright, charisma. Well, actually, First, I need to clarify. Do you actually plan to bring them all back alive?
That's, of course, his plan.
Alright, then, charisma leadership. Difficulty 8. Do you have any relevant specialties here?
Not in either of those, unless you let me use manipulation.
No. Okay, 2 successes, though. You see a few approving nods from some of the men who look to you from their mounts. You feel like you've instilled some words of strength in them. What's Cormac doing as Elined and Thomas try to raise the spirits of these young men?
He's watching approvingly. He had some words he might have shared with them as well, but they appear to be doing quite well.
We shall all have some good tales after this, I say. One of these young men looks over to the others and tries to force a smile. Be my first time in the Pennines. Aye, me too. And some of them kind of nod. They seem to be more enthused about it.
Well, then let's be about it.
Alright. And a group of them fall in line behind you.
Hopefully out of earshot of these soldiers, if that's possible.
Did you say something?
Can you not hear me?
I heard you say something about being out of earshot, but...
Oh, shoot, I wonder what happened there. I said Cormac's going to ride up beside Thomas, hopefully out of earshot of the soldiers, if that's possible.
That's possible.
And he'll give him stern glance. I have no doubt you believe that we're going to bring these young men back alive. But I, for one, do not. And I wouldn't have lied to them thus.
I fully intend on every single one of them coming back and having a mug of ale on me with a pretty lass on their knee.
You're a mad fool. But God love you.
No one else will.
And he smiles at that, looking back at this ragtag band following them. I barely even old enough to hold a sword.
I was 12 when I first picked one up. You?
8.
Well. Then again, considering my particular condition, it wasn't exactly looked favorably upon.
And those were different times.
Not so different.
He shrugs. We'll do what we can. But if it comes down to it, some of them will have to be expendable.
Naturally.
This is the nature of soldiering.
So where do we go first?
I'd say straight into the mouth of it.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
No point beating around the bush, as it were.
Instead, we let the bush beat around us.
Or we'll beat around inside the bush. Either way, it's a poor turn of phrase for the circumstance.
Cormac bobs his head and falls silent as they begin their ride.
All right. So the group of you, with the 3 gauntlet lords and ladies leading in front, lead this scouting group towards the Pennines, and the scene fades, watching the 13 of you leaving the city walls, with the tall, ragged hills and mountainsides in view and distance, forested and hilled. And as that scene closes, we will take a break here, and we will come back in 15 minutes.
Cool.
The gauntlet lords and/or ladies.
I mean, at the very least, if everyone gets slaughtered, that means your character has a way out.
I mean, that did cross my mind, but it's premature.
I mean, that is what Elined was intending to bring up. If everyone died, it's, hey, look, you can run off and become the person that you actually want to be instead now. And we can just say you've been slaughtered like everyone else.
It's premature, but that did cross my mind.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I'll be back.
It is premature, but it's hard not to think of such things when you're going up against werewolves. Potentially.
Well, and I've been looking at for opportunities to fake Thomas's death, but I was hoping it wouldn't happen at least until closer to the turn of the year.
Whoops.
In-game terms, anyway.
I'm back, sorry.
Welcome back.
Pupper's had to go to the patty.
Cool. Alright. We will return. So the scene opens back in Lincoln, returning to Robert DeVere on this night, which he is informed that his grandsire has returned. Your ranger, Guillaume, goes by Guy, is enjoying your hospitality, and he's actually still sleeping by the time you awake. He's clearly been exhausted. He's been sleeping most of the day, your staff tell you. Fortunately, you have other business to attend to on this evening. And does Robert still intend to go straight to his grandsire to report in?
He does. He'll let Guy sleep.
Okay. So soon enough, you return to the Tower of Lincoln, and you're escorted by Jean-Marc's ghoul. You're brought up to the top, this tower which overlooks the city and has these many hanging cloths that decorate the tower. And once you're let in, Reynaud stands off to the side as the staff closes the door on you, and you're in the room, and you see that Jean-Marc is rising from his seat in a fine tunic and cape. He seemed to be drinking something out of a silver chalice, but he rises when he sees you and actually smiles faintly. Robert, it is good to see you again. Reynaud informs me that Sergeant C has returned, and you have done well by the Covenant. Well done. And he comes forward to clasp your shoulder.
Robert gives him a polite nod. Yes, I have done my duty.
He smirks for a moment. I am glad that some sense was tucked into me. So many men for such a fledgling. I am sure she did not give you too much trouble.
None at all, but I wish I could say everything ended well.
Oh, was Ragnar late?
The worst is that she did not survive. The fledgling, as you put it. And of course, she knew nothing.
He looks at you for only a few moments before his eyebrows kind of go up and down as he shrugs impassively. So be it. Better to know than to not know. And he turns to take his chalice and take a sip casually. All the same, you have made recompense for the misdeed of not having a question sooner. As I understand it, this Prince Gabriel has been detained as well. I imagine Ragnar will be quite busy with him.
Indeed. And what of your men?
What of my men? And he turns to you suddenly.
Have you received a word?
They are out. Scouting still. I imagine.
Have you had nothing set up to receive word by now?
They had instructions to scout the areas thoroughly and to report when or if they found anything, and if nothing, then to return in 2 months. Why?
Since I was in the area, I figured I'd travel to Maiden Castle. Suffice to say, already one group has fallen to these barbarians.
What? What do you mean? He takes a step forward.
One scouting party bearing your flag, cut down to the last man, several bodies burned.
And he bares his fangs as he paces away from you. Maiden Castle, you say?
I would not be quick to send more men. This group is quite mobile. Indeed, on my way there, I was beset by their champion. Well, I assume he is their champion, with his strength and prowess in combat.
He turns again to look at you quickly. Did you recognize him? Do you know who he is?
Yes, as a man with long wild hair. He was wielding a great axe.
Saxon?
I believe so. Does it strike a chord in your memory?
Perhaps. There was a man in Ambrose Court many decades ago. He served Adam as well. Ferocious man. Jack Timbers. I pray that is not the same man.
Truly. Was he renowned for his strength?
He nods a few times. He was formidable. The anger he had, you would think he was one of the Bruja, but sometime after Ambrose became prince, he left. With some great resentment, as I understand it.
And perhaps Ambrose would like to know that this one that was part of his court is now traveling, slaughtering hamlets. As well as your scouting party.
He grimaces into anger again, and his hands clutch upon one of the tables. Yes. I shall inform Ambrose. It sounds as though it may be that Jack Timbers has aligned himself with this, or is otherwise cutting problems. Was there anything else? When you came across this hamlet, you said you were in conflict? In battle?
Briefly, I came upon them, saw their deed, and fled.
I want to be making a manipulation subterfuge roll, difficulty 6, not because you told a lie, but because you omitted a lot. No successes. He pauses as he's holding that table. Were you mounted when you found Jack Timbers?
No, I was not.
And he turns from the table to look at you a bit more suspiciously. By all accounts, Jack Timbers is a very fierce warrior. How did you get away?
I ran, using the powers of my blood as quickly as possible.
Give me another manipulation subterfuge. This one's gonna be difficulty 7. No successes again. He takes another couple steps towards you. You outran Jack Timbers.
At first, he caught up.
Go on.
Yeah. He actually swung his mighty weapon at me. I was able to deflect it. At that point, I held up my hand and said I do not wish to fight. He paused. I suspect it has something to do with the ring.
You suspect or you know? His eyes are narrowing. If Jack Timbers is out there loose, he is not following or submitting to the Covenant anymore. That ring will do you no good to him. Not unless there was something else.
I believe he held his blade because of my willingness to talk, and the ring gave him clarification of who I was.
He looks at you sidelong, expecting to hear more.
I can relay the conversation if you wish.
Please do enlighten me, Robert.
He spoke about his problems with the established order, resentment at being a killer for hire, or some such. He showed no love of the princes. Perhaps he thought he could turn me. I convinced them that I'm just a member of the Gauntlet. And it was no danger to him. And even if it came to blows, I would not have fared well against him. Fortunately, we did not make it back. I did not make it back to the soldiers, else no doubt they would have been slaughtered.
So you are telling me the reason he spared you when he caught you is because he thought he could turn you. And you told him that you were simply a member of the Gauntlets, he let you go. Is that what you are telling me, Robert? Think hard. I'll have you make a perception awareness roll, Robert.
Okay.
Standard difficulty. You've seen and felt something like this before. There's something behind his gaze that is supernatural. You don't know anything really more than that, but you know that there's something at work here behind his eyes or in his mind, something unnatural.
So noted. No, that is not all. I was just considering the implications of it.
Please tell me, Robert. You have nothing to fear from me.
It seems as if this group was not the same as the previous. No doubt they are in contact. And I mean to say, I do not suspect the Gauntlet. But I think perhaps the last passing met on reasonable terms. If possible, I'm sure the Gauntlet could be convinced to lead these rebels into a trap, since they seem willing to spare us.
Speak plainly when you mean the last passing was favorable.
Very well. When last the first group was met, did not come to blows. It was a diplomatic meeting. I was not a part of it, so I can only assume.
And something about that meeting led Jack Timbers to believe that he should not destroy the most prominent tool of the Covenant.
That is as it seems. Though, on speaking with other members, there was no sense of betrayal of the Covenant. Perhaps it was another obfuscation to prevent coming to blows with a lesser number.
Or perhaps they conspire against me. And he loosens his gaze on you and starts to pace quickly.
It is not out of the realm of possibility, but
So you agree?
consider.
And he interrupts you and stops to look at you.
No, not completely.
But it is possible.
After all, anything is possible. But we were all handpicked.
Yes, I picked you. Precisely 4 times like this. And he taps the desk a few times, the table. How can I be sure what lies or conspiracy passes between the tongues of the others? You must find out, Robert.
To seek a corruption within the Covenant.
The Gauntlet. Perhaps you were spared because Thomas and this De Courcy have made some kind of arrangement for my destruction, for the destruction of the Covenant. Who knows? And his eyes are wild and wide. You were there. Yes. Intent on creating conflict, Thomas. You must find out how poisoned the gauntlet is already.
I can set out to accomplish such a task.
Yes. He nods a few times, pacing again.
Still, with my previous thought, if such a thing is unfounded, it could be a useful tool to gather this group, as hunting them with parties of men will be leave them quite vulnerable. They're on very high alert. Would not be feasible to just send armed men out into the forest.
No, it is good that you alerted me to Maiden Castle. If they are now hunting my scouts... He shakes his head. And if Jack Timbers is among their rank... we will need greater forces. We must be careful. And you must be careful in your questioning, in your investigation into the true motives, the true loyalties of your peers. I knew I could not trust in the judgment of my own.
Of course.
Be discreet, but if you find anything that proves in your mind, in your heart, that they are aligned to the rebels, to this band of anarchs, you must let me know. And then we will spring a trap. I'll rain hellfire and arrows upon the whole lot of them. His eyes are as wide as you've ever seen them.
And Robert nods, feeling a little bit uncomfortable under this gaze, but continuing to uphold social graces.
I knew I could count on you, Robert. If no one else, not even my own counselors. I thought for some time only I could trust my own sanity. But I can still trust on you. And he nods again.
I am honored to hear such words.
You are dismissed to continue your investigation of the Anarchs and the Gauntlet.
Very well. Perhaps I'll write you a letter, as coming to Lincoln for everything is not very practical.
If it is important news, you should arrive yourself. You cannot trust the messengers, Robert. Who knows whose pocket they belong to?
Very well. I will use such caution.
He nods, looking down at the floor, and with the flick of his wrist, kind of dismisses you.
Robert will leave.
What's going through Robert's mind now after that meeting?
He's actually getting a grasp on how paranoid his grandsire truly is. As for his thoughts, he's not happy that his grandsire was able to see through his initial report, but he is he is pleased that these men will not be hunted down in a disorganized manner. He intends to keep his hunter a secret. Perhaps when the time comes, he can be used to track the group again. He doesn't really suspect anyone in the Gauntlet of siding with the rebels. Not powerfully. I think there's probably it was a diplomatic effort. And he is indeed hoping that it could be used against the rebels.
All right. With this meeting with your grandsire concluded, where will Robert go next? What will he do?
Well, for now, he'll actually look at Ghouling Guy and head off to... see, was it... Chester, yes. You'd head off to Chester to find the rest of the gauntlet.
Alright. You're spending a few nights to Ghoul Guy? Are you bringing him along, or how do you want to do that?
Actually, he'll have Guy accompany him, and yeah, he'll ghoul him over the process of it.
Alright. Taking a carriage from Lincoln to Chester?
Seems to be the most practical, seeing that it offers shelter.
Okay. So much as your peers had to do, you'll have to make a path through the old Roman roads going south on a road called Fossway until you bank north again on a Roman road known as Watling Street, which will take you up through Chester. Unfortunately, not a very straight path. And traveling just at night, or just in the day, and camping at night.
In this case, traveling just at night.
All right. So that will take you at least a fortnight. Assuming conditions are good. But you begin setting out. It's fairly easy to convince Guy to come with you. He seems to strangely be attracted to your company, and that makes ghouling him very easy, and that makes traveling with him even easier. You find that he's a fairly humble and simple man. He likes being outdoors, and he likes tracking and hunting He's always been very good at it, though not ambitious enough to really make any coin. You think if he wanted to, he could become maybe a royal forester or something, but he has no such aspirations, and so his skills have mostly gone to not waste, but certainly not to their full potential, as he's mostly just been living in Dorset. And he's actually a bit excited to be seeing more of England and going on these adventures and chasing these strange men. So he seems very much up and about and in for the adventure you seem to bring. You seem to get along fairly well with him.
Robert is glad to have his company.
All right. So the scene fades as the two of you are making your way.
One question.
Oh, go for it.
Did, looking at chat, did it look like there was a message left for Robert? Or did that completely get missed?
Let's see. No, you definitely would have gotten that message. Remind me what the message was.
Was basically just letting him know that we were in Chester and asking him to join them.
Okay. So you definitely received this message that, although it's been almost a month at this point, it's been a number of weeks since you actually saw them, the message you receive does seem to point them to still be in Chester.
Alright then, that is where Robert will head next.
Alright. We'll transition. So we transition back following Cormac, Elined, and Thomas as they make their way east out of Chester. And just to give you an idea of some of the roads and your options, so you came up north on the road that's known as Watling Street. It reaches all the way down to London, this old Roman road. Not many of them have been kept up, but some of the major ones that crisscross England have. Coming out of Chester, going east, this is the path that you took when you were scouting, and it goes north along the coast, along the waters that cross over to Ireland. And this is an old Roman road, that one of the few that has been somewhat kept up, and it leads up north to Carlisle. And it borders the Pennines on the east, on your right-hand side. There is another path which is not kept up at all, which once cut through the Pennines going northeast straight to York. That's long been abandoned and is some of the hardest and most rugged terrain. What would be the group's decision to enter the Pennines with that information?
Elined would look at it from a tactical standpoint. Can I make a roll to find out what would keep us the most hidden and well, without completely bogging down our forces?
You can. Let me look. Look at your sheet again. Because part of this is a balance of what you want versus how well hidden you want to be and different factors. I'll have you make an intelligence survival. Difficulty is going to be 8. You're not very familiar with the area. You're not confident that you can add anything here. It's tough to say. None of the terrain is very good. Some of it's hidden because of the nature of the rolling hills and the mountainsides, but you could get lost. You could get into some rougher terrain that's hard to get out of and trap yourselves, making it difficult even to flee or scatter. These ideas come through your mind and you can't solidify in one direction. Does Cormac add any input on the direction, or?
He doesn't really know this country very well. I guess I could just do a generalized survival type thing.
Yes. You can make... Well, let me first ask, to what end? What do you kind of want to figure out?
Well, where are we trying to get to exactly? We're just wandering the Pennines?
That's a question for the group.
Well, Thomas had thought to scout the foothills near the mountain range, or near the range. Going all the way into the mountains seemed A, like too long a ride, and B, unlikely for a band of Canaanites to go that deep.
I'm not sure how much survival is going to help with that then.
It all depends. It's like I said, it all depends on what you want to figure out. What you want to deduce.
I suppose the best thing he'd want to deduce is the most likely place for people who are allergic to sunlight to want to hang out. That's not obviously in the woods.
Sorry, so you want to figure out where the best place to hide during the day would be?
Yes.
Okay.
Which falls under survival if nothing else does. And if he has that idea, then they can search those kind of places.
Mm-hmm. I'll have you make an intelligence survival roll also, difficulty 8. Three successes. Let me look at the map.
wants to figure out, if Thomas's deduction is correct, that they wouldn't hide in the mountains, or would they because there'd be natural caverns?
Given the terrain and your just kind of general understanding of what you're seeing is probably what you're gonna see, you don't expect there to be many caves or natural caverns in the kind of terrain you're getting through. So they would either, if it was going to be Cainites out here, they would either need some kind of outpost or stronghold or some kind of man-made cavern, something not naturally occurring. They would need that to make any kind of lasting stay in the Pennines. This is not good country for vampires.
And he will tell his companions as much. Well, quietly away from the other men, of course. We should have thought to look into possible hiding posts before we came out so far. Old outposts, fortresses, caverns of the like.
That's a fair point, but as I told Lavelle, I wasn't expecting this to be a lengthy outing. Simply a close-in scout.
If there are any Cainites out here in these wilds, would they really try to relax so close to the city limits?
Well, given Lavelle's demeanor towards the Pennines in general, and the general attitude of the men towards the region, it seems reputation is everything.
Like the old stories of haunted forests I used to hear as a child. I always thought there was so much poppycock.
Often, there's just enough truth to those rumors to make it scary.
We could wander the foothills forever, but it won't avail us much. Time to formulate a plan.
Chester is Barbarossa's domain, effectively, the county surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
About how close to the border with York would we be getting?
Good question. Let me look at a couple maps here. That kind of depends. If you take the disused Roman road that goes north to Carlisle, you will only really barely scratch it. If you go... Obviously, if you take the road, the much more disused road that cuts northeast, that's basically overgrown now, you would quickly get into York. And if you go scrambling up the mountain, well, you'll also quickly get into the border of York. Yorkshire, I should say, the county.
I propose we scout along the main road. It's disused enough that any significant traffic by shodden animals would kick up sufficient evidence for us to track and give cause to send back a larger force.
And if there were any man-made structures that were in disrepair, they would be along the road as well. Good idea.
Precisely.
So you mean to take the road north to Carlisle, or the very disused one that cuts straight to York?
The very disused straight shot to York.
Okay. What are Elined's thoughts, as it's obvious when you get to this fork in the road coming up a little bit north from Chester and you go right instead of left, so you're going away from the coast, you're going into the Pennines itself, rather than skirting the edge of it. Does Elined say anything?
No, she's more attempting to keep an eye out in case anything happens. They were already informed that the intention of this was to scout, and it could potentially lead to more dangerous endeavors.
All right. And just for clarification, how far are you going? How long do you mean to stay? Are you staying there a couple nights, or what's the plan for logistics there?
Well, Thomas's plan was to return to the tavern, or return to the city walls before dawn.
You're not going to make it very far in at all if you want to try that. The terrain is really rough. It's almost bushwhacking.
Well, then we are going to be camping, it appears.
It seems that your men, at least, are supplied for 7 to 10 days, you gather. Elined gathers. She's the most familiar with supplies for soldiers on the move. But Cormac, you recognize that as well. They seem to have rations enough. For now.
"4 days out, 4 days back. That way we don't stress rations."
And where do you propose we sleep?
The men will be digging latrines anyway. We can definitely compel them to dig a more substantial structure.
And as for how to explain to them that we're traveling only at night?
We're attempting not to spook our quarry.
It's a precarious position, but worth a try, I suppose. If you really intend to go through with this.
The alternative is to return empty-handed with no information and tell them that we were too afraid.
Appealing to my vanity now, are you?
Simply stating a fact.
And Thomas, are you the one delivering them the information that you're moving at night to be a little bit more discreet and
Yep.
Okay. So to do that and to just kind of wrap in your dominating them and compelling them to look the other way and make these areas for you, I'll take a manipulation subterfuge, difficulty 7. One success.
So many botches happening tonight.
Fortunately, it wasn't a failure or a botch. You have success. Your gifts are successful in compelling them, and it seems like, although there's some hesitation among the men about traveling at night into this territory, they believe you, and they agree to it. You think as much out of fear and lack of leadership of their own and having nowhere else to go and nothing else that they can do, they kind of have to. But you can see the concern in their eyes.
Better to be traveling at night than fast asleep. At least then we can see what's around us.
And who is doing the ranger lead on guiding you through this very overgrown, disused Roman road? It's going to involve a lot of perception, a lot of survival. Actually, I'd also accept wits. Wits survival. Just depends on who's leading.
Unless anyone else wants to stand up for it, I can.
Sounds good to me.
Because I may or may not have a applicable perception specialty. Possibly. Maybe. Possibly not.
Alright. I will need a... Yeah, I'll give you a perception survival, difficulty 7.
Does detail-oriented work?
Yes, I will. Because part of this has to do with making sure you're not getting off track and finding the very slim signs of where this road used to be and making sure you're not leading everyone off of a cliff or something. Alright, 2 successes. So this first night is slow going, but with Elined's sight and her wherewithal, her wits, she seems to be good at finding the path, finding the trail, finding safe ways to make your way through a lot of this. A lot of it isn't so much dangerous right now as it is just slow going. It's not good terrain for moving horses or moving supplies through. But you start to make some progress. And by the end of the first night, you're a good ways into the Pennines. And it seems right now that things are fairly uneventful. The night is quiet. Very little sound except for the sound of hooves, and there's very little chatter among the men. But as dawn approaches and Thomas sets about ensuring that the men have set about latrines and camps, and camp is made and preparations are made for the group of you, you all find a spot along this road in between the foothills, and you find a place where you can rest for the day. And just so I'm understanding it right, you instructed them to build ditches for yourselves to build tents over, and you're staying under that?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay. That's kind of what I figured.
Something we can throw a tarp over, effectively light-proof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of tarps makes you feel a little bit more secure. And dawn comes, the day passes, and soon enough, the three of you are waking up in this very dirty, dugout ditch under these tarps and under this tent. And I'll take a blood point off for everybody as you're rising this evening. And as you're rising, one of the men you spoke to before you left, Thomas and Elined, he sees you kind of emerge from the dugout latrine, and he approaches at not a run, but a quick pace. Sir, lady.
What is it, lad?
Some of the men, they reported seeing they think there's wolves in the area. They heard sounds. We think it might be good game. We think it might be good to improve morale a bit if we went hunting.
You'll do no such thing.
I know our supplies are fine, I just thought it might improve morale a bit.
If we take an animal, it will disturb other animals. Get blood in the air. The beast howls, yelps, gives away our location.
Yes, sir. Apologize, sir.
Quite all right. You were thinking of the men. That's a good leader.
He smiles.
But do be aware of the sensitive nature of our particular situation.
Of course, sir. And he nods a few times. And you can see that most of the camp is pulled, but for the tent that covers your tarps and your ditch, which has been made. And you see that the men go about quickly pulling that together and getting it loaded up on the horses. And soon enough, everyone seems ready to go again.
On the upside, on the return trip, we won't need those dug. We'll simply reuse the same camps.
Should it be safe enough to return the same way?
And they call me a pessimist.
Yes, well, best to be ready for any situation.
It's what I always tell them, but yet I'm still the pessimist. He shrugs.
Oh, but the people that call you pessimists are always such fun to mess with. Just hit them with a bit of optimism every now and again, and they won't know what to think.
What's Cormac doing as the group of you pull camp and get ready for your second night of venturing into the Pennines?
He did hear the mention of wolves, right?
Yes.
Yes, he's very subdued right now. Almost nervous, looking over his shoulders as they put things together and ready up to leave.
All right. So the men mount their horses, don their armor and weapons, supplies are loaded up, and you again set off, led by Elined. And I will take another roll for your perception survival. Same difficulty. This night is a bit slower going. It's obvious Elined is still making some progress, but not as much as the first night. You're getting fairly deep into the Pennines now. The hills and the mountain ranges behind you are getting thick in layers. You don't recognize really the landmarks that you used to be able to see from neither behind you nor ahead of you. Some very high mountain ranges look down upon you, both to the north and the south, and you're at the lowest level. The day is fairly uneventful, fortunately. As you arise on this third night, you can take another blood point off. I'm gonna come up. Hold on one sec. This man, who's kind of come to represent these soldiers, this would-be sergeant, is named Kyle Jenkins. And he reports to you that the signs of the wolves seems to have abated. There weren't any more signs of wolves during the day. It disappointed some of the men who were hoping to bring back some pelts, but he assured the men that it was more important for them to stay discreet.
This particular night, Thomas would probably mingle among the men, see about keeping their morale up in a different way.
You find them as you rise for this next night, this third night, preparing. It seems like a lot of them have pulled camp in expectation that you'll be traveling soon, but some of them still are sitting around a campfire, and they're getting a little bit dirtier, but they overall seem to be holding up well. How does Tom go about inspiring morale?
He'd probably regale them with tales of his own early days on aboard ship. It was quite a terrifying time for me as well, young man. Out at sea for the first time, just learning the ropes, quite literally. Nearly lost a leg in the rigging once. But all of my anxiety was for naught. At the end of it, on the other side, I managed to grow up to become quite the merchant. I imagine you as well will look back on this with fondness and shake your head at your own worry over imagined monsters.
One of these young men with barely stubble for facial hair looks over to you from across the fire. You don't look like you're much older than us. How long you been in the service?
In my current position, not very long at all, but I have been a leader of men for quite some time.
You ever had to kill anybody?
Unfortunately, it has been a necessity.
His face grows somewhat dour as he looks down at the fire.
The trick is to never take pleasure in it. Survival necessitates action. Unfortunately, sometimes that action negates the survival of another.
And this other young man, Kyle Jenkins, he looks over to this young stubble-haired man. Don't worry. We won't have to kill anybody. And when we get back, we can tell the tale as big as we want. And no one will be able to challenge us on it. And he smiles.
Perhaps we outran a few hundred wolves instead of merely being sniffed about by just the one.
Aye. He looks over to you, nodding and smiling, almost grinning. That'll bring the lasses. A few of the other men kind of smile and nod, and overall you feel like your company and your discussion with him has elevated the mood a bit more than it was. Well, we should pull camp, I suppose.
Quite so.
And they set about doing just that. At last, the tents are pulled down, the tarps are placed back on the horses, the men saddle up, and Elined leads them on. The third night of tracking into the mountain ranges of the Pennines. We'll take a third roll from you.
So, question. With her knowledge of shadows and of darkness, would using the first level of obtenebration help out with the difficulty any, if only to make it easier for her to see in the dark? Or is this more of a difficulty that is high based off of the overgrown nature of the road?
It's a combination of factors. Certainly shadows play into it. Although I would not say that's the most problematic part of forging ahead.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to figure out what I could do with my limited dice pool.
No, I understand. It's good. It's good to get creative. Let me think. I don't think it's dark enough that would significantly alter your difficulty. It might help here and there, but I'm going to say it's not really going to make a mechanical difference.
Alright, I'm not going to do that then.
Save you some blood. Alright. You make a little bit more progress tonight, about as much as the previous night. I will take a wits alertness roll, difficulty 7 from everyone. Alright, so each of you has a pretty good awareness of how far you've been traveling, how large you know the area is, just based on your spatial orientation and your wherewithal. And you can each deduce that you must be almost halfway through the pass. So 3 days in, you think on the 4th day, you'd have to get at least halfway, past the halfway mark. And at that point, you'd be as deep in the Pennines as you could be without actually scrambling up the mountains. Just to give you some perspective on where you are in the pass to York.
Thomas was actually going to bring this point up with his companions while camp is being set up. The men have enough rations to see them safely home, assuming it takes the same amount of time to get back. The 3 of us are going to start feeling the trials of travel very shortly after that. We can either press on for another day or begin the return trip tomorrow evening.
I would prefer returning before that becomes an issue.
As would I. We've traveled 3 days now and found nothing.
Outside of the howling of some wolves.
Not even a hoofprint.
But chasing shadows.
Which either means they weren't Ragnar's men, or they took the long way around. Which seems foolish and excessive.
I don't think it's either of those things, considering what territory we're currently in.
I agree with Elined on this one. I'm not going to lie to you, this country makes me nervous.
Still,
Admittedly, I'd like to return sooner rather than later for another reason. I may be perceptive, but I am not the most adept when it comes to the wilderness.
then you're in good company.
Next time we decide to venture into the wilds, we should bring a real guide.
We really should.
Next time we decide to venture into the wilds, we'll spend more than a single day preparing. Even so, I think I might leave a memento of our travel behind, just in case someone happens upon it. And before Thomas collapses for the night, he's going to pin a letter for the denizens of the forest. It might never be found, but hey, extending an olive branch is extending an olive branch.
What shall the letter say?
Because I want this to not be a breach of the silence, but at the same time I want it to be as clear as possible what's being requested should the right person happen upon it. We came in peace. Well, here, I'll just write it out for you.
Alright, so effectively you're writing an olive branch to the would-be lupines.
Basically, yeah.
Well, Cormac and Elined, you can see Thomas is writing something just at the end of this night.
What are you writing, a love letter?
Well, it's not to you, so what does it matter? He grins a bit.
Our fates are tied. If you bring the lupines down upon your head, they'll come down upon mine as well.
And on this entire group. I'd rather not have them chasing our tail as we're retreating.
Do as you must. We just urge caution.
When Thomas finished writing, he'll turn it over and show it to them.
Cormac just shakes his head after reading the note.
Now they have a location.
If they were going to assault the city, they would have done so already. Decades ago.
Maybe not directly, but by controlling the woods, they can control supply lines.
Does it look like many supplies have traveled this way in recent memory?
I meant them moving to the more traveled roads.
If they were going to do that, wouldn't they have already?
Perhaps not. I don't claim to know their minds. I only prepare for the worst.
Always plan for success, but be prepared for failure. At any rate, we'll return Esther at dusk. I'll tell the men.
All right, but remember, if this is a suicide note, there are easier ways to go about it.
If the creatures in question wanted to catch us, it wouldn't matter whether I left a note or not.
All right. Where do you set this note?
He's going to make a small cairn of stones and set a large stone atop it, so it obviously looks unnatural and deliberate. And he's going to put the note underneath that large stone. It shouldn't be big enough to completely cover the paper, but it should be big enough to, protect the writing from the weather. Somewhat.
So you said about building this cairn. Some of the men passing by kind of look at it odd, clearly with strange expressions on their face. They're not sure what you're doing, but they don't question it. And they said about preparing camp as you said about setting down for the coming day. Is there anything else you guys do on this night?
Apart from informing the men that we'll be returning to Chester at dusk? Nope.
So keeping my weapon close to me just in case? Nope.
Okay.
I'm sure that will raise morale when he tells them that, so Cormac tries to keep his spirits up.
So you tell the men tonight that you're leaving tomorrow?
Yep.
Okay. There's a mixture of enthusiasm and relief. A couple of people had wished that you'd led them further in, or that they had seen something, but mostly it's relief. And so you set about preparing your latrine and the tarps and the tent over it, and sleep the day away. You can take off another blood point as you rise on this fourth night. And as you rise, as in the past, Kyle Jenkins, this young man, comes up, and he looks a lot more excited than he did in the past as he sees the group of you emerging. My lord, there's been a discovery during the day. One of the men, I told him not to, but he went off exploring. He found
he
a
all right?
cave.
Have the
On
men
that, we will end the session.
Ah, shit.
As it is
Dicks.
9 o'clock.
It's definitely not. It's like 9:51 or 8:51. You're totally wrong.
It's basically 9 o'clock.
I love cliffhangers.
All right. Now you're faced with the decision of what to do, which you can think on over this next week when we will pick it up again.
Dicks.
Great game. I didn't anticipate you guys digging into the Pennines, but I'm glad you did. I'm gonna have so
Now
much
I'm
fun
not.
with this.
When you say it like that, I'm not glad.
Ukar's gonna kill me again.
So pessimistic.
But
Let's
that's half
see?
the fun. That's half the fun. Is having your characters die in new and creative ways.
You have a very interesting definition of fun.
Oh, yeah. Let's call it, interesting when my first instance GMing had a player group that decided, oh look, the floor is cracked over here. The heavily armored soldier, am going to go across it without looking for anything in particular. I'm going to kick down this door without trying to listen for anything on the other side.
Ah, yes, I remember the days.
And by the end of it, it was just... Yeah, there's only about 1 or 2 people that survived that because of those bad decisions.
Only a couple people surviving because of bad decisions.
Oh no.
Why would you give him ideas like that?
What?
Oh please, every GM's run into players like that.
Well, let's not dwell on that. Let's do some entertaining role players.
Let's.
Start with Elined.
Entertaining role-playing. You know what? I'm gonna give it to Devere because he keeps digging himself in the hole and his group in the hole with his grandsire. He just seems like he can't help it.
It really does.
I love every moment of it.
I don't, because I'm the one he keeps throwing under the bus.
So good.
Well, I mean, this time around he was wanting the entire group investigated instead of just the 2 of you.
There you go.
Remember, it's not paranoia if someone's actually conspiring against you.
But we're not conspiring against him in particular.
Robert, how about you?
I like Cormac tonight.
Cormac?
Yep.
Cool.
Yearly protests, setting up an archery lesson.
And Cormac?
I'm going to give it to Elined tonight for guiding us through the wilderness without leading us into the mouths of wolves. Yet.
Yes, and at the very least, I might be able to pick up a second dot of survival.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. And Thomas.
I'm not going to encourage Robert any further in this this endeavor, so I'm going to also give it to Elined.
I lulled.
Just because it's maybe not the healthiest thing for the group doesn't mean it can't be entertaining.
Well, I mean, it
Yes.
can be entertaining.
I mean, it's going to be very entertaining if we survive this, and then the rest of the group finds out what he did.
That'll be entertaining.
Now
boy.
Thomas will have to punch him twice.
Can't wait.
Good times. I'm very much looking forward to next game. Okay.
How many general XP this time?
We'll do 2 experience. 2 experience all around. And 1 vote Robert, 1 vote Cormac, 2 to Elined. And cool game, excellent roleplay, very fun. Looking forward to next game.
So I now have the second dot of survival.
Cool.
And I will have the 5th dot of vicissitude. Here we go. I mean, what?
Just
Gotta work on 4 for your
That's-
first discipline.
Now that is the question. If vicissitude is treated like the contagious disease, like it is in the Final Nights.
just do that form of the Draken and fly out, and you'll be fine.
So long, suckers.
Okay, cool. Good game. Have a good night, guys. I will talk to you guys throughout the week and see you next week.
All right.
Very
Night.
Yes.
Night.